Hey guys, it's Chris with Drop Dice. So we're back again. This one's kind of just a random video. I meant to do this Saturday, but I fell asleep. That's kind of the short answer on it. Then I had other stuff to do later in the day, so I couldn't get around to it. I mentioned that, my plan for Saturday because I kind of did that response to the chat, and it's something that I don't really care about talking about, the whole conversation of like who's a better game style and who does things better. It was a video, and basically the short of it is, it's don't be a dick was kind of the takeaway from that. Um, this video is kind of a complement to that one, and it's a little bit more constructive than my simple advice of don't being a dick, which is still there. Don't do that. If you find yourself not getting games, it's probably because you're already doing that and you need to correct yourself. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about this week is how to stop problem players most of the time. Unfortunately, I can't guarantee that this is going to work 100% of the time, but I guarantee that it will help your game overall if you start to do this. Now, this bit of advice is hard to apply to one-shots. One-shots are a little bit different in nature, so you can't really always apply it there. But there is a way to apply it, and I'll come back to that towards the end. The first thing that I want to start with is have an understanding of who your players are going to be. I don't like blindly accepting people into my game. I like to know who they are within the community. If they've played in other games, maybe see their stuff. Like I'm not going to say that I'm going to not allow a brand new person in my game, but I feel a little more confident if I at least see them having conversations in the group, even if they've never played a game before. And so for me, I like that kind of mentality is somebody who's already kind of stepping into the group, asking questions, seeing what they like, commenting on other people's stuff. To me, that's a good sign that I'm going to get generally the kind of player that I'm looking for. You can kind of tell by their comments if they have a lot of negative comments, or they have comments and they write them in a style that doesn't really work well for you. Apparently the puppy's going to play in the background, so everybody enjoy that with the cat. But yeah, so one of the things that I do like is to at least maybe not know necessarily, but at least learn who your player is. Number two here would be, when you advertise your game as a GM, I think it is your duty. This is especially important for one shots to say what kind of game you're looking for. The one chance that I've gotten with the one shot group to actually put together a post about what kind of game that I would like to run, which is the Souls of Steel game, and the people that played my game, or at least were interested in my game, saw this really long write-up that I did that was basically, here's the background of the game, here's what I expect. Here's what I expect of you as players. Here's what I expect of you as people. Lloyd over at Jarl DM actually made a really great video on how to put out there what you are looking for a one shot and how to start building a one shot. He was going to do a series, and I think he got a little distracted with another project. So I will link that video, at least the one that talks about how to advertise and get the kind of players and stuff that you're looking for your one shots, inside the comments to this video. I did learn how to do some Google magic from another person on YouTube, which kind of encouraged this video. Let me just take a look here, see if I can pull it up here. I believe it was Periwinkle Spaz or Periwinkle Fuzz. I know I screwed that up, but kind of bear with me here. Looks like I am not going to have an easy time finding it. Periwinkle Spaz. If you haven't checked her out, she does responses to the RPG group, and she's part of the group as well. However, Miss Periwinkle there does not do a lot of RPG videos directly on her channel right now. She does a lot of playthroughs on different survival games. So definitely check her channel out when you get a chance. Her original video, which is a private list to the group directly, I'm not going to share it because I know I have some viewers that are not with the group, and it's more of a group discussion, and that's how she wanted it. But if you've seen her video or you haven't seen her video, go see it, and you'll kind of see what kind of prompted this in the comment section with a little back and forth between her and I. But basically, the next point I have is it kind of goes with point number 2, which is as a GM, you know, present what kind of game you're looking for. Point number 3 is as a player, present to GMs what kind of game you want to play. The reason that this is a separate point is because it can be totally different than what your GM has in mind. If you go to a game and you know for a fact that, hey, I like you know, action role-playing games, is kind of the terming that I like to use. Essentially, I like role-playing. I think it's a very important aspect of the game, but I like when the action scenes are kind of big, cinematic, and fun, which is what a lot of like power players really like from games, like people that like playing more powerful characters and things like that. That's generally how I write my characters. My characters, they're flawed, but they're skilled at something, and I really like when you're able to let those skilled moments shine, and combat is a little bit more gritty and things like that. So it just happens to be my preference. But me telling you that as a future GM or a current GM lets you know the kind of games that I would find enjoyable. And you know, having that understanding of what the GM is ready to do and what the player is looking for in general is really good, because you will learn that some players will only play in a particular style, or they can play across the board and play different styles. I like playing different styles. To me, the hobby is kind of is a learning experience. I look at it as always exploring and learning something new, which is why I like trying different systems and things like that. And so for me, trying different play styles also is good. Give me just 1 second here. All right, so doing the different play styles I think is good, and it allows you to expand. So if you do happen to be one of those people that kind of typically plays in one play style, if you haven't stretched out and tried some other ones, go ahead and try some other ones. You'll definitely find there are things to take from other people's play styles, or at least watch videos with other people's styles, and that'll help out quite a bit. Excuse me, just 1 second. Sorry about that. They were getting kind of loud, and I was pretty much done with them playing, but they're going to ignore me entirely. And then the last thing that I have for you is, this is how I really regulate my games and ensure that the game goes the way that I would like it to and that my players are enjoying. The first thing that we do is set up what's called a social contract. Essentially, I come forward with my idea and I say, hey guys, I would like to play a game with this as my focus. And usually I start with like something small to kind of seed it. So I don't do a social contract all the time with my regular table, because my regular table we've been playing for years, and I revisit it every so often, and I make sure that everybody's kind of on board with the same plan, but I don't necessarily go through and write a new social contract every time. I think social contracts are super important for campaigns because it sets the tone for the campaign and sets player expectations and GM expectations all at the same time. So basically how I would go into it is I say, hey, you know, guys, I would really like to run this game, and my basic thing that I really want to do is I really want to play a game that is based on exploration, and it's a sci-fi game. This is a game that I tried pitching to my players in the past, so any of my players that are watching, you'll know which one I'm talking about. And basically, you know, I have them come together and they go, okay, well, that sounds interesting, but let's say, you know, I've got one player who's interested in maybe diplomatic things that could be established through there, and he says, you know, I really liked Star Trek Enterprise as a show because they had a chance to kind of explore not only and see like new worlds, but they got to visit new cultures, and I'd really like to see that played up in the game. And me as the GM, because I haven't given it a whole ton of thought and I haven't closed my mind to any of their suggestions, I can write it down and I can say, hey, Murdoch really wants to do social interactions, meet with aliens, and do all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. And me being a fan of the show Enterprise, I'm a little bit more on board with it because he gave me something that I can recognize. So I do recommend that when you do social contracts, you do kind of like things that everybody in the group will recognize. Don't think of like esoteric TV shows that only you watch or something like that. Try to come up with something that is relatable to everybody. That way they can kind of get an image. So I've got one player who's interested in kind of a almost Enterprise feel. And then I've got another player, Jeremy, who liked the lightheartedness that came with Stargate. And one of my favorite Stargate shows, again, not a very popular one, was Stargate Universe, which is kind of similar in vein, where they get on the ship and they're trapped and they kind of have to learn, evolve, and the first portion of the show is basically just figuring out their new environment, the ship. And then once they figure that out, they have to operate the gate. They need to get food and they have to survive that way. And I really like that. And so I'm like, okay, so Jeremy's looking for something that is maybe a smaller cast, but has a lot of like stuff going on inside there, and survival is going to be part of it. So I've got this idea that we're looking for a space exploration game that's got a little bit of survival, and maybe there's a problem with the ship. And basically, I talk about this in my world building series, that having the players involved in every step of the process. The social contract is like the very first step for me in conducting a campaign. So basically, I have these ideas, and then I get to Tom, and Tom is a pretty cool guy. He's pretty much down for anything, but he tells me, he runs Shadowrun, so he doesn't really want anything that is like bogged down with corporate stuff like he does in Shadowrun. Instead, he wants something a little bit more free-flowing and heroic. And so, okay, that's a good thing to take in. And so with my players, I've got this kind of skeleton of what the game should look like. The best part about doing the social contract is, me as the GM, I can go, okay, so we have this idea of what the game is going to be. We've got this bullet point list, which will help me write the story and everything. Let's talk about what we expect for our characters. What role should they play in the story? And I suggest that you kind of work out kind of like a 2-3 sentence elevator pitch style thing for the game, and say, okay, so we've got these ideas. Here's my pitch. Basically, Earth has been lost, and it was lost generations ago. The information as to what exactly happened to Earth is a little bit mixed up. You know that it was a big environmental issue, and that Earth had to be evacuated. Earth was evacuated via these large ships that were called arcs. And on the arcs, they are kind of like this one larger ship frame, and then there are these little tangent arms that come off the sides. The arms are what are referred to as gardens, and inside the gardens, humans are being clone grown or frozen, depending on which humans they are, within the ship. And so it gives them the option to play either humans from Earth, or they could be clones. And I've kind of narrowed off aliens for the start of the game. And I haven't completely closed it with this pitch. And basically, I'm telling them, I want a little bit more military style of game, because you guys are the last survivors of mankind. And the crew is going to be kind of skeleton crew, because most people are in stasis or growing at this point. So my players have the option to be clones, be humans from Earth that have woke up from stasis to take their shift with managing the ship. It gives them a chance to be scientists, people that would be useful on a new Earth, because every ship is going to have basically an optimal crew for establishing a new Earth, but most of them are going to be unconscious during the time until they've discovered a world that is a prime candidate. And they've got this manifesto that basically outlines what the new Earth should be. And my players are kind of digging it. And basically I go, okay, so here's some ideas, and I gather some pictures real quick, and I go, okay, I like these, and these kind of explain what my game's about. All my players are kind of on board with it, and they have different ideas, and we get kind of this varied casting. And then I go, okay, well, I see what you guys want to play, and I've got one guy who wants to be like a military guy who's a clone. I've got another that wants to be an Earth-born scientist that just thawed out and is on his shift. I've got another one who he's interested in playing like a diplomat, perhaps maybe a linguistics specialist. And it sounds like they're very different because of, you know, what we have here. And I'm just going to list 3 of them, for example, here: the military, the scientist, and the linguistics. Um, it sounds like they're kind of different and spread out, and they could definitely do little side stories where they just focus on their specialty. But at this time, it's really easy to come together and say, okay, we know that basically you guys are all awake because it's your shift to watch the ship. But what purpose do you have with being friends with each other? Choosing to, you know, take missions where you go together. Um, and this gives a chance for you to, out of game and in a meta aspect, decide how the game is going to come together as far as the characters are concerned. After you've decided the character portion of it, I would move into the out of character portion of it. As a GM, I have pretty set forward, easy to know rules about how I feel about things. Like, one of my things is I don't care if you know meta knowledge, because I think meta knowledge makes the game a little bit more fun. So like sometimes I will tell you stuff that's going on in the background, but it is not yours to use in game. And so if I catch you using that meta knowledge to your advantage, it becomes a problem. Usually I have like a 3-strike policy. It's, you know, you can accidentally do it a couple times, and then after that we have to have a conversation about you continuing to play because you're abusing the fact that I'm giving you some knowledge. And when I say meta knowledge, I mean stuff like doing a cutscene that's like a bad guy talking to his minion, that you wouldn't technically know anything about. If you were to use that, and you like, the bad guy talks to the minion about his plan, if you were to use that knowledge to defeat the bad guy's plan, that's where I have a problem with it. But if you know that and it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's like seeing a cutscene in a movie, I'm fine with that, and that's why I do that sometimes. And then my players can tell me what they expect from themselves, from me as the GM, and from each other. I think that part of the social contract is probably the most important part for stopping problem players before they begin, because you'll be able to talk amongst the group and decide, this is what we expect of each other, this is the kind of game that we want to run. Like when we did L5R this time, we had a little conversation, and we didn't do the whole social contract, but we did the portion of what we expect from each other, what we expect from me as the DM, what I expect from them as players. And basically we all decided that we like beer and pretzel games, but because this one was going to be recorded, we were going to take it a little bit more seriously. And as a whole, my group loves L5R as more of a serious story, so they take it a little bit more serious to begin with. So you can see that reflected in the recordings. However, if you're doing a one-shot, it gets a little tricky because you most of the time don't have the ability to do a social contract with these people, because you are setting up these one-shots kind of on the fly. I do recommend that if you do a one-shot, you at least plan a week ahead of time. That way you can get people signed up and you can kind of guarantee seats are going to be filled. If not, and you're kind of jumping in a one-shot as a player, you know, just take a couple minutes from the GM if you've never played with them and just be like, hey man, this is the kind of games I'm interested in. Does that fit for what you have planned? The GM in a one-shot is ultimately going to be a little bit more important on whose say is important, because one-shots are kind of a one and done. And a lot of GMs are pretty liberal during one-shots, and they'll be like, you know, that doesn't normally fit me, but whatever, come on, have some fun. So I mean, don't feel weird if you talk to a GM and you don't quite fit all the way. Most of the GMs in the group will probably be fine with it. Now, the other thing that I do that I just did actually after game session 3 of Legend of the Five Rings is I do what's called checking the temperature, or Roses and Thorns is another title that it's called by sometimes. Essentially, after you're done with the game, ask your players, hey, we played a couple game sessions now. It's been a little while since I checked in with you. How do you guys feel about the campaign right now? Is it going the way that you want it to? Do you see anything that you'd like to have improved? Something that you'd like to have changed? Would you like the story to go in this particular direction? And basically, by checking in with your players every couple sessions or so, you don't necessarily need to do it absolutely every time. Like I usually do it about every 3 to 5 sessions. I'll check in with my players and say, hey, how do you guys feel about stuff? I think it's a good way to keep that pathway open. And I think a lot of problem players do come from miscommunication or the fact that they don't get to communicate directly with their GM in a healthy way. So I think the GM facilitating a roses and thorns session will help improve that. And you won't end up with a player who's kind of jaded and will try and sink your game or destroy it, or, you know, giggle because they destroyed your game world. I think that if you do this stuff, it does help prevent that in the long run. Like I said, I can't guarantee it's going to stop everybody, because there's always going to be that one person out there that is just determined to be a dick in all games that they're a part of, and we all know somebody who's like that. um, you know, it's not going to work for them, but it will work for the average person. And I definitely recommend doing a social contract, at least for a campaign. Um, I didn't think to do it for Legend of the Five Rings, but I probably should have actually done a full social contract and done a video. What I may end up doing is the next campaign that I run, whenever that happens to be, is do a video where we talk about our social contract with whoever happens to be playing in it, and kind of give you an example of what a social contract is. Lastly, I'd like to leave you guys with a little bit of reading material, because I always like to, you know, outsource some of my thoughts and things like that and tell you where my thoughts. Okay, my headset died there. I always like to tell you guys about where my thoughts come from, where I'm getting my ideas, if they're not quite my own or not solely my own anyways. And one of those things that I'd like to talk to you guys about is it's actually from, let's see, Gnome Stew Publishing, or excuse me, Engine Publishing, from gnomestew.com. They're the ones that put together these thoughts in one cohesive thing, and then Engine Publishing is who they went through. But Gnome Stew, they've got a lot of really great GM advice to begin with, but they started putting out these books that were kind of the best of their GM advice, broken into topics. And my favorite one in there is called Odyssey, the Complete Game Master's Guide to Campaign Management. And it is a very thorough, like an exhausting, thorough document on how to build a campaign. If you've never done a campaign before, I recommend it for you. If you've done campaigns before, but you find that maybe your campaigns aren't going 100% the way that you planned at the beginning, or they peter off and they never quite finish, or maybe your campaigns go great, but you're looking for areas to improve or just some light reading, I really recommend this book, because it really does, like I said, it exhausts the topic of how to build a campaign, how to maintain a campaign, and how to end a campaign in a way that is going to be fun for everyone. The first couple chapters are pretty much dedicated to solely the building of a campaign, because they follow kind of the same adage I do, is if you build a campaign strong and it has a strong foundation, it will be strong on its own. So it put the authors put a lot of emphasis on that, and you can see that inside the book. But what I'm getting at is one of the things they talk about in depth is the social contract and how you should outline one if you've never done one before. I also have an article on my blog, Drop Dice, where I did a social contract with my group, and I kind of talked about it generally, because there are some topics that come up in social contract that I don't feel comfortable sharing everything. Like like I have a player along with myself who happens to have PTSD. I'm not going to broadcast his triggers or my triggers to everybody in the world. But you know, sometimes there are things that will come up in game that we kind of glaze over, because I don't necessarily want to offend anyone. And it's not just because that he and I have PTSD. It's just a common respect thing. I'm not going to do something that I know is going to anger, upset, or make a player uncomfortable. And that's where a social contract really shines, is because you can have that open dialogue and say, hey, I'm not cool with, for example, sex scenes in my games. I don't want a whole lot of detail. I'm cool if they come up and we just hand wave it, but I don't need dice rolled and you to tell me how pleasurable or not pleasurable the whole thing was. I'm fine with us going, and they went into the bedroom, and then that's the end of the scene. For anybody who's watching, that's how I handle sex scenes. I'm personally not super comfortable with talking about all the ins and outs in the bedroom. And that's just me. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for this random thoughts video. This one's been going for a while. I like the random thoughts videos because I just kind of ramble and I go in with just kind of a seed of a plan, and then I just talk with you guys. I know that can be a little rough watching, but hopefully you enjoyed this one. I'll probably put out some more random thoughts videos later this week. This is not the second video I was talking about with Saturday, where I was saying that I would never talk about that subject again. The next video I do is probably going to be that one, which is my opinions about multiple systems, which kind of get me into an argument point with other people, and I get a little frustrated with. So I'll probably put together a video that talks about where I am at as far as like using other systems, what my opinions on that sort of thing are, and why it's valuable or not valuable. But this video was kind of to elaborate and provide a little bit more constructive suggestions for the group. If you are watching this and you made it this far, thank you very much. What I'd like to ask from you is, if you are a YouTube provider or not, please comment in the section below if you have any ideas on how to stop problem players. The most obvious advice that anybody's going to give you is don't let them play your game or teach them. I'm fine with both of those answers, but I'd like to see something a little bit more constructive than those two. Both of those answers are very viable and acceptable answers. But I would like to see maybe your suggestions on how you handle the situation to prevent problems from coming up in your games. Like I said, I think social contract is the tool that works best for me. If you've got something else that works really well for you, maybe it's like a lot of email that goes back and forth regularly or whatever it happens to be, I'd like to see some videos where you guys talk about what you do to prevent problem players or your games from being completely derailed. With a particular focus on campaigns, I think one-shots are really more of a GM focus thing, but I think a campaign is a player group effort. So I think it's a little bit more important to prevent problem players there. I mean, worst happens with a one-shot is you didn't enjoy it and you're just like, meh, it's a one-shot, and you kind of move on with your life. If you have to play a game with somebody who's being, a problem player for 8-9 sessions in a row, that's when you start to get videos and people like, oh, I hate that guy. What we're trying to do is make it to where we don't have anybody feeling like they hate anybody at the table. You can't stop it, but you can try to. All right, guys, that's what I've got for this video. Like I said, I'd like to see your responses, whether through comments to this video responses, or otherwise. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you guys at the gaming table and probably later this week with some more random thoughts videos.